challenged constantly.
Well, we're challenged all the time, but that's the intent.
And they will. And they will challenge you.
Well, the bitter taste is when the customer says, oh, so you mean I gotta go downtown and I gotta try to chase down the city clerk and I gotta try to chase down the planning department director and it gets unuser friendly. And it may be more perception than reality, but it's what the customer feels, so.
No, we've dealt with developers that they'll look at the policies and try to stick it to you based on that.
Do we have any more questions or comments on that?
No, I guess, the only deal that I have a question is during the plating application process and before final plat, that's the only one that needs clarification. All the other stuff is okay. Go ahead, Ryan.
Next section is 7.8, impact fee fund account. I think it's pretty self-explanatory on the changes that are there and that what the account is supposed to be doing. It's a little bit more clarification. Are there any questions on 7.8?
Is it pretty easy to do that?
What's that?
To figure out interest owed and all that stuff having to do with receiving an impact?
No, it's not. It's a nightmare. But
But-
you gotta do that.
So if we include that in there, we'll have to set up to do it.
I think we do. We have to do that anyways, but it's not easy though.
Right.
It's full time, somebody.
You don't want to commingle friends and you also want to keep track of yours.
Right.
Leandro Garcia, our CFO, can you comment a little bit more on how the account is being funded and allocated and what is being done at this time?
Well, we do account for the receipts and separate water and wastewater accounting accounts, and the portfolio is combined. But one of the things I wanted to bring up on the refunds on 7983 is that it refers to the finance code statutory rate, section 302.002. That currently has a 6% default rate when an agreement between a creditor and a lender don't establish an agreement. 6% is way out of line with what we have earned historically and especially today. So there is another section that refers to the 30-day 100,000 CD, which is more in line with what we actually earn. That's a 0.15% interest. So I'm going to have legal counsel verify our true obligation, whether it's a statutory 6% or the 100,000 30-day CD at 0.15%. But we do account for the on our books for the receipts for each payment of water or wastewater separately.
Before you go down the board, we found accounts, not on big accounts, where checks sat there in files for years, John?
There were some that
Years.
displaced.
50,000. We have. Maybe that's what I can tell you. We don't track it like.
All right, Vernon, we're running out of time, but go ahead.
Okay. Section 7.9 is on refunds, and it's an effort to try and save a little bit of time. Is there any specifics in here that we want to address? Section B is a whole new section, and some of it has been reworded on Section A. And a lot of it is the same thing, but it just like Leandro had mentioned, it addresses the finance code, other government areas. And Section B refers to a city subdivision ordinance, and that's on page 11. And it talks about ordinance number 2008-567 TT. And in there, it just talks about how application process at the city of Brownsville expire in 1 year.
And is there any reference here as to other state laws that we need to take into consideration besides this ordinance?
I'll refer that to Mr. O'Neill.
The question again, Merrill?
The question is on the ordinance number 2008-567 TT that the city of Brownsville has currently adopted in reference to the application duration period. Is there another section that addresses any other laws that are currently in place that address any type of subdivision?
Well, I guess on top of it, it does say need to fix the law found in chapter 395, and so I guess that's where that is addressed.
Yeah, the concern in 245 is, 245 of the government code talks about the shortness or length of an application period that a city can enforce. And the concern I have is that one of the sections of 245 says that a city should not adopt a period of time within which an application can remain alive that's shorter than 2 years. And the city's TT ordinance is 1 year. Now, in defense of the city, I would say the city qualifies that 1 year. I'm kind of reading between the lines here, but hoping that this is what their philosophy is on it, if I had to defend them, and that is that the application is merely that first part of the developer's intent to develop. It's a preliminary overall area development plan. It's a concept. It's filling out a bunch of paperwork saying, here's what I'm going to do. The city also has an ordinance, and that application has to be completed under the current city ordinance TT. It has to be done within 1 year, or that subdivision falls off the books, and you have to restart. Some might argue that 245 would prevent that. Now, in the city's defense, they also have an ordinance under the model subdivision rules that says that the planning process, the more important, the longer term, the guts of developing a piece of property must be completed within 3 years. And you can see that that clearly is longer than 2 years. So I would say that would definitely pass the muster of 245 because it's longer than 2 years. It's not too short. So, you know, I guess I would take counsel of the city attorney on TT, but would defend it in that sense, in that it's a two-step process, and that parts of it is longer than 2 years. That's very much legalese, but since you asked, very perceptive question though, Mr. Freeze.
I just wanted to make sure that, as to the ordinance and how other laws come into play.
Okay. Any questions on 7.9 refunds?
The salient point to remember here is that refunds are made to the current owner. And on a casual reading by a layman, that might seem imperfect or unjust. But the theory behind it is that at the time that you transact your sale between buyer and seller, you should account for the fact that a new developer might be entitled to a refund as the buyer of the property on monies that were actually paid by the seller of the property. But the law is very clear that the current owner gets the refund if there's any refund, not the prior owner or the prior person that paid. Therefore, the reasoning behind making this point rather obvious in the policy as to who would get any refund, if any refund would ever be paid.
All right, Erlen, we're,
This could be a good stopping point here. We could pick it up for the next meeting. We're just trying to get through these section by section over time here. There's no urgency tonight, but we just want to keep working.
all right.
Would you do better to appoint a committee here to go through the whole thing and we come back to this today?
Well, that's what the staff is doing.
But we've done that, and it's up to the board, whatever the wishes of the board. Typically, the last time we did something like this, about 6 months for the board. Same kind of thing.
We have the items on for action during the regular meeting.
Yeah.
We can address the following, it's actually just 2 pages left, and so I can address the changes within chapter 7 of the item. do the regular meeting, or you want to do it?
Executive session. What, if it's appropriate, executive?
No,
That's not
Okay, then go ahead and just finish it up right now then.
The last section is the paragraph that is added, and it's the use of other financing structures, and a whole new paragraph was added on there. That's the main change that is on there. And it talks about how an owner may request to also voluntarily request to PUB to reserve capacity in its facilities to serve future development. And when that happens, is PUB provides, I'm not reading verbatim, but it says that there's a 30-year availability. So we're making a commitment to that particular developer that we're gonna have those services available for all of his customers within that subdivision for 30 years. That we're gonna make sure that we have the water infrastructure needs, elevated storage tanks, treatment facilities, wastewater needs, and pumping station and things of that nature for there. And that's basically what that is in there. The remaining 3 sections, or 4 sections, it talks about offsets and credits against impact fees. Again, the changes that are made in there are just referencing 395, which we already discussed that, maybe it's an overkill in our section, on our end, but those are the changes that are made on there. And also the land use assumptions section, in addition to the water and wastewater capital improvement plans and impact fees. And it talks about appeals in case somebody wants to appeal, what happens and what process and what burden of proof, who should be providing that thing, those things. And the last one is relief procedures and changes that were made. Is the addition of the last sentence says, if the developer and owner is not in agreement with any of the final administrative appeals to the city commission, then the developer or the owner may then file suit in the appropriate court of law. So that is added. And basically is they can appeal because they feel that we're not administrating properly. They can appeal to the city commission. The city commission can make a determination. And if they say they don't like what the city commission is interpreting the law, then
Is that based on charter?
It's really based on 395, and if you think of it logically, if the complaint is against the way the fee is being administered by PUB, the first level of appeal in effect would be to the staff of PUB and the management. Then it would go to the PUB's board, and if the developer didn't like the result there, they would appeal it to the city commission, because the city commission is the one who adopts the impact fee program. So they're kind of the ultimate local authority as to how the impact fee.
Is there a provision in the charter that allows that?
No, it's in 395, so it would overlay your charter. You'd be required to follow that hierarchy. The thought here is that it informs the developer that there is an appellate process and that it goes through these
I thought
channels.
that the city, the only business with PUB was to appoint, issue debt, or sell assets.
Well, it directs us to administer the impact fee program. So we're kind of the,
Raise fees.
we're the guys who invest the money, spend the money, figure out what the demands are gonna be on the system, and then recommend to the kayak and the commission what we think should happen down the line. But the city sets the policy on land use assumptions, capital improvement program, and the ultimate fee assessment. And then we administer it. So the local final say-so really is with the city, and then from there you go to district court. Or perhaps the attorney general or whoever.
All right, Marilyn, is that all?
That's
All right,
it.
thank you very much. Well, do we have the lights on again, and we'll get ready to start the regular meeting? We have a very important item, the first item on the agenda, August the 10th, I'm sorry. It is 5:04 on the clock. If we have a quorum, I'll call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the swearing in of our new board member, Mr. Enrique G. Nájera. And I believe Judge Arturo Cisneros Nelson will be. It is 5:04 on the clock. If we have a quorum, I'll call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the swearing in of our new board member, Mr. Enrique G. Nájera. And I believe Judge Arturo Cisneros Nelson will be, or unless the judge is here for some other purpose. Please come forward there.
He wants to run by the impact fee.
I, Enrique G. Nájera,
Constitution
the Constitution
and the laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
so help me
so
God.
help me God. I, Enrique G. Nájera, do solemnly affirm that I have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, promised to pay, contributed, or promised to contribute to any money or things of value, or promised any public office or employment as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation thereof, so help me God. Thank you, Ron.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
All right, we now have some matters to discuss in closed meeting that are concerning litigation and sensitive, tentative and sensitive items under Texas Government Code, Section 551.071 et sec. I will entertain a motion to go into closed meeting. Can I have a motion? Second by Mr. Hinojosa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We're going into executive session. If you do not have anything. All right, I'm going to reconvene this meeting into open session. I'll ask everyone to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is an action taken on item discussed in the closed meeting, and we only have one item to take action on.
Mr. Chair, I want somebody to move to authorize the CEO to submit technical corrections for grants previously given to TUB to be redirected to improving water storage.
All right, everyone understand the question motion?
I make a motion.
Mr. Elliott? Second. Second by Mr. Velaez. Sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Reject, you're so authorized. That's the only item we have under number one. Number two, Attorney General Manager report, but before we start that, I'm going to bring up one item, which is the public comments section. We only have one person who signed up to speak, Victoria Salazar, on behalf of the American Heart Association. Ms. Salazar here, please come up forward, or somebody else from wherever, from the American Heart Association.
Good afternoon. I wanted to come and introduce myself and make you aware that we are currently working on the American Heart Walk. It's an annual event, happens every year, and it's going to be at UTB on October 24th. And this year, our honorary chair is Judge Carlos Cascos. And we have a goal to raise $100,000 for the community. And I'm here to ask you for your company involvement in any way that you can. You're going to be handed a form. It's going to be asking you if you'd like to participate so that I can follow up with you in the week to come to get your employees involved and possibly even speak with you about sponsorship for the event. That's all I have to say about that.
Anybody have any questions? It's not an action item. We don't have it on our agenda yet, so it'll have to be put on our agenda, requesting a donation from us.
This is actually just, I'm requesting an opportunity to come visit with you as company leaders to see how we can get your companies involved with the American Heart Walk.
Well, as part of the board, I want to go ahead and commit to you today that I'll be participating in the art walk.
Thank you so much.
And I
And
challenge
you
all
do-
the board
you also-
members to walk along with me.
It's only a mile and a half.
But you also, like you said, you want us to try and get the PUB employees to be involved.
PUB has committed to participate in the event through way of forming teams and doing some fundraising as individuals and employees. But for those of you that aren't employees of PUB, I want to ask for the opportunity to come visit with you so that we can get your companies involved, as well as the people in the audience who need some help,
And our viewing audience.
and our viewers. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll go then to general manager report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I did hand out a calendar of events coming up for the month. You can take a look at it. We do have the Chamber of Commerce annual banquet at the Holiday Inn. The 13th is Thursday, and I know some of you have already RSVP'd with Norma. If anyone likes that, we have a table or spaces for that. We are doing a legal orientation with John Davidson's office on Friday the 14th. Usually do that for our board members. You know, we've had a couple go up already. It's pretty thorough on the history of PUB, and it's good. And I think we'll have a couple of weeks, possibly our newest member going, and Dr. Brown's also going to attend on that. So
Is that going to be held where?
it'll be in San Antonio.
What was the time on that?
We're going to try to go up there by noon or so on Friday, and come back that day or next morning. So we'll work that out.
We're talking about this Friday?
Yeah. We do have 2 or 3 of those, so if we
Yeah.
can't do one, we can reschedule and we'll get back the same day. Like I said, a couple of our board members have won, and pretty good. They went
Very
ahead
good,
and you won.
very good.
Yeah, sure. Financial report, Leonardo's going to do that. Just an update on the stimulus. We have our plans and specs in. They were all delivered. They're under review. Comment period for the application itself is ended. They're going to send us a letter on that this week, some few comments, and then they'll be looking at the details for the plans and specs hopefully in 2 weeks. The state deadline or goal is to approve our grants in September. The state needs, we're looking at somewhere around 46 to $50 million of 100% grant funding on that. So don't see any issues. Some few things we're working on that are minor, but so far it looks pretty good. So the annual financial report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Nahara, welcome to the board. My name is Leandro Garcia. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Brownsville PUB. I'll be going over the financial performance report as of June 30th, 2009. This first slide provides the revenue piece of the financial performance report. Line 3, you'll see there provides the net operating revenues totaling $123,467,322 through June. That comprises of both operating revenues and wholesale revenues. Line 7 provides our gross revenues after adding in interest, other revenues, other non-operating income, totaling $128,417,569. And the slides that follow, I'll be comparing these amounts with the budget and prior year-to-date numbers. To get to the adjusted gross revenues as prescribed in the bond covenants for calculating the COB transfer, the City of Brownsville transfer, we back out the fuel, energy costs, wholesale energy expenses, and Southmost Regional Water Authority contributions for debt service and O&M. That leaves an adjusted gross revenues balance of $75,396,128. 10% of that is what we calculate for the City of Brownsville transfer, $7,539,612, and then we also net out their usage for electric, water, and sewer, which totaled $3.1 million, leaving a net cash transfer to the city as of June for $4,416,916. I do want to mention that we are making a little bit of a margin on our wholesale revenues. We've made about 1.2 million, 1.3 million when you compare the 5,156,000 against the energy expenses for wholesale of 3.8 million. This slide provides the expense and debt service and balances available. Our total expenses, line 15, as of June, were $37,221,681 for O&M and non-operating expenses. Debt service for the first 9 months was $16,393,906 for a total requirements amount of $53,615,587. This is exclusive of the fuel and Southmost contributions. The net balance available to surplus is $18,657,845. Of that, as I mentioned, $4,416,000 has been transferred to the city as their net cash transfer, and a balance available of $14,249,021 has been transferred into the various accounts that we've earmarked this year, which are here included in lines 23 to line 26. The first amount there of $750,000 is for our operating reserve fund. We have an annual target of $1 million. We're continuing to build the initial requirement of $12.5 million in the 2005 debt restructuring up to about $18 million. So we're continuing, or we have been continuing every year adding $1 million. The operating sub-account for fuel adjustment has received $3 million against an annual budget of $4 million. You know, we talking a little bit about this in one of our agenda items. We have experienced fuel costs well below those anticipated, so we have built up a good balance there in the fuel sub-account, including monies carried over from fiscal year 2008 and our current accumulation there of $3 million. The CIP funding, line 25 of $7.3 million, 75% of our annual requirement of $9.7 million in CIP. Improvement Reserve Fund, this year we had a budget of $1.5 million, and we've deposited $1,125,000. Overall, we'll be at the end of the year completing the 4th installment of 5 installments totaling $3 million each year. We started this in 2005 with a zero balance, and it was in our bond covenants after part of the restructuring to accumulate $15 million over 5 years, where 2009 represents the 4th year. So we'll have $12 million through the end of September. We'll still need another $3 million going into 2010, which we're going to try to address here for the board in one of the agenda items included as well. The net balance available to PUB after meeting the year-to-date deposit requirements into these funds is $2,047,612. Here in these graphs that follow, we compare the actual 2009 realized revenues or expenses versus budgeted for the same time period, and actual realized through the same time period for 2008. Net operating revenues, as I discussed earlier, were $123.5 million. These were $7.1 million below the budgeted of $130.6 million, and $36.9 million below the budgeted the actual $160.4 for 2008. Primary drivers here in the revenues is fuel and a decrease in some base revenues and other sources of income, such as interest and other non-operating revenues. Gross revenues of $128 million. There in the center were $8.5 million below budgeted revenues of $136.9, and $38 million below the 168 achieved in 2008. Another big decrease or variance when you compare to 2008 is also off-system sales. We're way behind off-system sales through this time period. Last year we were at about $14 million, and as I showed you on the first slide, we're only at $5 million. We're under budget as well in that area, off-system sales. Adjusted gross revenues, after backing out the fuel and the Southmost contribution, are a little bit more in line with the budget, $75.4 million versus $74.7, $700,000 above budget, but below the 2008 levels of $92.6. Part of that has to do with decreases in off-system sales and interest income. Fuel and energy costs have been below budget. We have experienced below the expected fuel costs and natural gas prices, and here we resulted in $7 million below budget amount, 45.9 versus 52, and $19.2 million below 2008 levels of 65.1. O&M expenses are slightly under the budgeted. We did implement a cost containment plan back in May, June, to start mitigating some of the shortfalls we're experiencing in the utility, in the water utility and wastewater. So those have paid off or continue to pay off. And we are below budget by $5.2 million when you compare the 35.9 versus the 41.1, and above budget, above actual numbers for 2008 by $4 million, 31.9 versus the 35 actual. I already talked about the balance available to surplus, 18 million. Overall, 14.2 has been retained for PUB purposes, the various operating funds, reserve funds, and 4.4 has been transferred to the city. We are behind schedule, behind 2008 actual levels. At this time, through June last year, we had already transferred 6.1 million. And as we experience decreases in all system sales and interest income, that affects the city transfer as well, since it does come into play in the 10% calculation to the city. The balance from electric has contributed to the most part of the funding for the operating reserves, and 14.76 million. Water utility has done a positive turnaround. We're at 1.24, and wastewater at 2.66 contributions to surplus. Consumption here, this trend, year-to-date consumption, the red line is the actual 2009, the blue is actual 2008, and then the black is the 5-year average. As you can see there, for the month of June, electric consumption was 120 million versus 123 in 2008. So it's a little under, but over the 5-year average. We are year-to-date 50,759,907 kWh behind or under 2008 levels, or a 5.7% variance there. We did see an increase during July, so I'll be reporting that it'll be the first month for the electric side that we exceed 2008 levels in July. So those numbers for July will be a little bit more favorable. Water consumption, beginning in April, we started exceeding 2008 levels there, the top red line, and we came down a little bit in May and down in June to 651,000 gallons. Of course, these are per thousand. So we have achieved a positive variance here at 2,834, very small, but nonetheless positive when you compare year-to-date consumption to 2008 actual levels. Same thing with wastewater. Here, 436 versus 419. It's wastewater still remains a little bit below 2008 levels by about 0.96%. We track rainfall, precipitation. We did have a wet May, somewhat, a little bit 4 inches, about 4 inches in rainfall, but it was down to a very small amount in June there. We didn't experience it for July. The 2008 levels that you see here, 13 plus inches. So July will be another dry month, but it'll be the electric consumption will be a reflection of the hot days when I report July results. Mean temperatures have stayed in line with the 5-year average in the last year's, but well below with the 5-year average mean temperature, but well below the 5-year average maximum temperature. One of the things we do monthly is compare our rates for electric here to other local utilities, and we're always very pleased to report that we have been for the past few months PUB's favorable position versus the other utilities. Our total bill for the average 1,000 kWh consumer was 89.61. This will include the fuel, the energy charge, and the customer service charge. Compared to Metro Valley at 104, other IOUs well above the $100 mark. So we do provide favorable rates here to our service area customers.
Besides that, we give quick service and response.
Being a local utility, yes, that is correct. We provide on-the-spot service here as expected from our customers. This is the first time that we also introduce our comparison to other municipally owned utilities. We've included here the city of Austin, city of San Antonio, other smaller cities, San Marcos, Kerrville, New Braunfels, Bryan, and Denton. We have, we are looking very favorable here. We're slightly under Austin Energy. 99.38 is our average bill for the same 1,000 kWh user. We're at 89.61. We're slightly over, not by much, City of San Antonio, CPS. And one of the benefits they have is nuclear power and a little bit more coal, yet we have capitalized from purchase power and our coal power, so we are looking very favorable compared to other utilities. Well below San Marcos, in line with Kerrville, in line with New Brownsville, is well below, a little slightly below Bryan, Texas, and Denton. So we are in line with the other major utilities in Texas that are municipally owned.
So this is the only municipally owned?
There may be others. We have included other companies that are like distribution companies only, or not generators, but we can include others. There are others. These are the typical ones that stand out. Comparable, yes, comparable. On the CIP side, we've achieved a 34% expenditure rate against the 75 million annual approved spending plan. Electric has achieved 43%, or 11 million. Water, 24.6%, and wastewater, 30.3%, with 6.3 million there for water and 7.8 for wastewater. These projects are multi-year in some cases, so they do, we do, get board approval of the spending plan with the intention to continue the program into the future years, the upcoming years. So we will, be revising the CIP plan as we bring the 2008 and 10 budget to the board at a later date. And that concludes the financial performance report.
Anybody have any questions?
That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Item 3, I'd like to
Still have
just
not-
move later on.
We're going to item number 4, the quarterly investment report for the period ending June 30th, 2009, pursuant to chapter 2256.023 of the Public Funds Investment Act.
Yes, this report is being submitted to the board in accordance with the provisions of the Public Funds Investment Act, in that we are required, and our internal investment policy, to provide an update on a quarterly basis to the board on our investment and portfolio holdings. So I'll be going over the report entitled Investment Portfolio Summary for the quarter ended June 30th, 2009. And I'd like to touch on just a few of the pages, in the report. You can turn to page, and I'm on tab 4 of the agenda item, which is item 4. And then into the report that's attached to the agenda item, I'll start with page 7. And that is a pie chart that provides the distribution of our, it's not up there, of our investment holdings. Page 7 of the attachment to agenda item number 4. And you'll see here that our primary investments as of June were being held in the investment pool, 62%. U.S. Treasury notes, we had 4% investments in those securities. Bank deposits, 7%. And we try to limit the amount of bank deposits since the earnings credit is very low at this point. And at one point, it used to be high enough to pay for the monthly depository bank fees, but it is very low, just like all short-term interest rates are at this point. We do have 4% in the CDARS program that the board approved several months ago. We have $5 million invested in those instruments, and then 23% in agency securities. We cover this so that we can report to the board the exposure we have between the different securities. We do have limits prescribed in the investment policy, and some of these that cap it at 75%. So we do, even though some of the times the interest rates are favorable, the yields in a certain instrument, we do try to keep it under the 75% cap. I'd like to take you now to page 9, and this provides a quick overview, one summary page, of the yields that we have realized on the various instruments here. I'll start with the first few lines, capture the agency securities, instruments we hold with Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, Home Loan Bank, etc. They have currently, as of June, had a par value of $28,800,000, a market value of $28,932,443, and represented 23% of our investment of our portfolio. You'll see there that we got into some of these instruments early, so and some of them were out for 2 years, so they have very favorable, not favorable, but higher than normal yields, ranging from 1.2, 1.79, 1.79 to 2%. But those account for 23% of our portfolio. The next group of monies are bank deposits. We have $10,885,982 as of June 30th, or 7%, realizing a very low 0.45 yield. Our investment pools and money markets, we get involved with 3 pools: TexPool, Techstar, and Texas Term. Had a total of $79,936,978 in market value, or 62%, and those were the biggest sections of our portfolio, achieving a 0.43, 0.44, and 0.54 yield as of June 30th. And those yields, you'll see at the bottom line is it will bring down the higher yields that our agencies were achieving. We have $5 million in certificates of deposit through the CDARS program at 2.81 yield. That was 4% of our portfolio. And then some treasury notes that were yielding 1.08, 1.09 through the June time period. Overall, our yield was 0.92%. This was a drop from the March 31st portfolio from 1.23. As we dropped from 1.23 to 0.92. A lot has changed between March and June. Interest rates, short-term rates have continued to stay, very low. To where we're not achieving the interest that we had anticipated. To give you a brief summary, we had budgeted $3.5 million in interest for 2009. We've only achieved $1.3 million. Our budget through June on interest on that 3.5 was $2,625,000. So we're barely, we were 50% of the budget through June, or $1.3 million. That's a 1.3 under realization of revenues, unfavorable variance. For the same time period in 2008, we had through June already achieved $2.5 million, and we exceeded $3 million by September 2008. So interest rates have played a major role in our revenues, to where for 2010, we're only projecting $1.1 million, and that's almost a 2.4 million decrease from this year's budget of $3.5 million. I mention this is because anytime we have lower projected revenues, it does impact the city of Brownsville transfer. Losing $2.3 million translates into $235,000 for the city. Losing off-system sales, I mentioned we were at $14 million, and now we're down to 5. Losing $10 million means a big chunk of money also for 10% for the city. So those revenue losses do impact the city. Speaking of the budget, we're working close with the city on some of these projections, and we do, plan to set a finance committee meeting within the next couple of weeks. August 27th is the date, so we can start talking about some of these budget issues with the finance committee and the board, and then as well introduce some of the rate study options for the study that our consultant that did the rate study will be introducing as well. So we will have a little bit of time later in August and in September to discuss our budget and how the shortfalls are impacting us in 2010. So, but interest is one of the key items. We don't see in the foreseeable future an increase of interest above 1%. They've stayed at about 3 or 4, or 0.3 or 0.4 within the last 3 to 6 months. So a little bleak in that area. That concludes the investment report.
Anybody have any questions? Not, thank you very much. We're going to go back to item number 3, consideration and approval of sponsorship for advertising in Valley Interfaith. I believe we have Judy Vetta and Terry Brown here with Valley Interfaith.
My name is Judy Vera, and I'm from Holy Family Parish, and I've been with Valley Interfaith the last 25 years. And the reason I'm still with Valley Interfaith is that we try to help people to know where to go and how to ask for what is due them. We found out that a lot of people don't have the internet, etc. So thank you for this time tonight. PUB has been a supporter of Valley Interfaith for the past year, and we have copies of last year's book for each of you. Our work this year is the creation of how to guide. It's the creation of a booklet on how to guide for people in the valley that do not have access to the internet. They will have information on emergency preparedness, the CHIP program, Medicare, and so on. Your sponsorship will make this book a reality. If you have any questions.
And you're asking a donation in the amount of?
10,000. We want to get 100,000, and we are almost there. And with your support, we'll be able to make it.
We did do 5,000 last year in sponsorship.
The ad for the picture of the, I haven't got to it in the
Yes.
book, but it
Should be in the book.
yeah. But in the,
It's one of the yellow pages,
one of the yellow.
the last one. It's in the middle.
This is a way to give back to the community a little bit.
Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make? All right, Ms. Terry Brown, would you like to say anything?
Well, I just wanted to say that the book this year is really going to be different in that we learned that about 40% of the families in the valley are living at or below poverty. And when we learned this, we realized those are probably not the people that have Roadrunner or have the internet. And so this is really going to be a new project for the organization to be touching the people in the valleys that just don't get the kind of information that they need. So it's a different project than what you have in your hands, which was really a celebration of the work over the last 25 years.
Does it require a motion?
Yes, it does.
I'll make the motion to contribute 5,000.
I have a motion to contribute $5,000, and I have from Marilyn, and I have a second from Mr. Morales. Any discussion? Questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Guys have it. We'll be contributing $5,000.
Okay, thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. Item number 5, consideration and approval to amend the fiscal year 2009 capital improvement plan budget. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, this item seeks authorization to amend the capital improvement plan budget. As I mentioned earlier, we have realized $2 million in final surplus dollars, primarily from electric, and at this point, that $1 million, along with $1.4 million in already program money that we're asking to be reprogrammed, we'd like to get it amended into funding $1,389,800 in vehicles and $1,037,262 in equipment, for a total of $2,427,062. We've had internal committees study different proposals submitted by staff in terms of what the operational groups need to maintain compliance with new imposed rules or standards, as well as to achieve better reliability, better customer service or marketing and production efforts. So we are requesting additional funding for vehicles and equipment at this time, for a total of $2,427,062.
Now, the vehicles there's 2 items that are in the consent agenda.
Yes,
Are those some of the vehicles?
Those are 3 of the items are in the consent. They're replacing 78, 79 vintage and stuff that's already been parked aside, and it's still, the requirements are still needed to be fulfilled by the operating groups, by field personnel, whether they're booms or.
You don't feel that this reallocation, amendment of the budget is viable? I mean, we're not gonna be needing the money?
Not at this point. We're very comfortable that the $2 million will stay intact, or we're using 50% of that in surplus to the end of the year, since it came from electric and based on projections for July, August, and September. And then the monies that are being reprogrammed, the projects that were earmarked with those monies are being deferred or funded differently. So.
Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, without having the breakdown of where that money is going to be reallocated to, I would like to hold back till we get that. I know you touched on some of the things, but I want to see the whole list of where that money is going to be reallocated.
We do have a list available. We didn't make it part of the package.
But it's not here, this item that we're authorizing for the reallocation.
Okay.
I mean, we're already talking about shortfalls, in the budget. And I'm not saying we don't need it, and I'm not saying I don't want to approve it. I just don't know if this is the right time to do it.
What we've done in the past, and when we have monies like this, is we target one-time expenditures as opposed to applying them to a shortfall in the upcoming year. We want to keep the utility self-funded for operating purposes, revenues and expenses. What we can do is you can give us authorization on the total amount, and we bring in future meetings, what we anticipate with your approval to proceed on the procurement.
On the items.
Kind of like draw down on it, like we are with the consent agenda items.
I just don't want us to get to the position where if we have a surplus, we got to spend it. I mean, we weren't going to spend it.
No, but the timing, the equipment, some of it is for the wastewater, and it's going to be essential in the undertaking of some of the wastewater projects. We are going to contract some of it out with the stimulus, but nonetheless, some of the maintenance is still requiring the need of equipment. And Gigi or Jaime can probably elaborate on that, but some of it has to do with winches and equipment needed to pull out pumps, heavy equipment or materials. So it is something that has been on the table for some time. We just, in prior years, prioritized some of the electric needs, bucket trucks, 90-footers.
Yeah, normally those things come before us on an item-for-item basis.
And we're going to bring them to you. Right now, this is just the budget.
We're not asking to.
Yeah, this is
just the budget.
This is just an amendment of the
Budget
budget.
allocate the money.
But when we actually procure it, we need your authorization. We'll bring those and tally them up, run a running tally, provide your running tally on what, amounts of the 2.4 we're recommending to be used in future meetings.
If it's subject to that, the final approval for this money gets reallocated, but won't be spent without our approval.
Right, that's correct.
That's it.
Aside from the consent items,
This is an item to amend the budget. Move item from one.
I just don't want you coming back saying we already spent it, now you're committed
No,
to pay it.
We haven't approved the expenditures yet. All right. Any other questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve staff recommendation to amend the budget in amount not to exceed $2,427,062.
so move.
Have a motion by Mr. Melissa, do I have a second? Second by Mr. Nakano. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Guys have it. Item number 7. Number 6. Consideration approval to pre-fund the improvement of reserve fund. All right, Mr. Gaskin.
as I mentioned in my report earlier and in prior months, PUB has achieved very favorable natural gas prices and energy purchases, economy energy purchases on the market to meet our ongoing demand, local customer demand. So the use of a fuel sub-account has been very low. It has been insignificant, or we've been able to apply monies that we accumulated in the fuel sub-account in 2007. As of today, we have approximately $7 million in the fuel sub-account, and by the end of the year, we'll have $8 million, which will comprise of the $4 million accumulated in 2008 and the $4 million accumulated this year. The objective, of course, of this fund has been to hedge against spikes in natural gas prices or energy prices, so that we can maintain a consistent or constant fuel factor for our customers. We have been very fortunate to keep it at about 4.5 cents per kWh, and even with that, we've achieved a very comparable or favorable overall electric bill, as I presented when we compare it to other local utilities and other munis. Since we have that opportunity here, since we've accumulated these monies, the recommendation here is to apply $3 million of that towards a final installment of the Improvement Reserve Fund. As you recall, we have a $15 million 5-year target imposed on us by the bond covenants. We will achieve $12 million by September of this year. We'll have one final $3 million. What we'd like to do is fund it at this time and get it off the books, or get it off the requirements list for off the 2010 budget. This will provide a little bit of relief in the 2010 budget. That's $3 million less that the electric utility and the other two utilities will have to fund. And it'll allow us to keep a good balance of $5 million moving forward to mitigate future gas price changes or energy purchase power changes as we try to manage the month-to-month fuel factor for our customers. It has been very favorable. We've applied a little bit of the 2007 here a month ago. We did see a little bit of an increase, but for the month of August, we lowered the fuel factor down from 4.5 to 4.4 to 4 cents per kWh. So our projections on natural gas prices, Fernando's not here, but are really looking very favorable. Even in 2010, we don't anticipate funding the fuel factor, the fuel sub-account at that $4 million level. We're going to scale back on that a little bit. So with this pre-funding, as mentioned, it'll get the $3 million final installment completed ahead of schedule, and we'll have the $15 million as the bond covenants require us.
Is there a cap in that simple count?
We're trying to get 15 now, right?
In the improvement reserve?
No, in
In the field, no, that's internal, that's at your discretion, your flexibility. If we had it at 0, we would be adjusting the fuel factor monthly to recoup actual
we don't
cost.
want to do that.
But if we have 10 million, we may not use it, and it may be all for naught, so.
At least 4 in there, we want to keep at least 4.
At least 4.
Is there a bond covenant on the fuel adjustment?
No. No, that's just our internal hedging in lieu of an outside insurance or hedge program.
And what's a good reserve to keep in the fuel adjustment account?
Historically, in the last 2-3 years, we haven't applied more than $4 million.
And that will get us through fuel peaks adjustment?
Yeah.
Right,
For at least a year or 2 years? or-
Correct. The $5 million won't probably get used until late next spring or early, or next summer, if we project the current fuel cost to be kind of leveled out or consistent here within the next few
What
months.
happens if we put this back into the general fund, will the fund balance, help, the city?
No, it's already been, the 10% has already been applied against this. And here again, this is another source that if we apply it to one time, it doesn't obligate, a future, revenue source to funding an O&M, a recurring O&M item.
I think the idea of getting 15 million paid off in reserve, is a good idea. Go by with our bond covenants and.
Combination of utilizing idle money and meeting the bond covenants and providing a little bit of relief in our 2010 budget.
Anybody have any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve recommendation of $3 million. I have a motion by the mayor. Do I have a second? I have a second by Mr. Morales. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. It's approved. Item number 7, consideration and approval to provide commercial paper funding for water and wastewater capital improvement projects revised for the period of July to September 2009. Garcia, you have the whole meeting here today, don't you?
One of our, as part of our commercial paper program, we are committed to report to the board the projects that our engineers have scheduled for debt funding. And this month, or today, we're working with the fourth quarter of the year, the months of July, August, and September. The total package for this quarter is $7,814,868, and those amounts by month are in the attachment. We had previously brought to you almost $3 million out of the July required spending. This month, we're bringing you another $4.8 million, most of the August and September amounts identified there. The quarterly amount is $7.8 million. When you add the prior quarters of almost $10 million, that'll bring our commercial paper funding authority that you're granting to our internal staff for projects, a total of $17,809,330. So we have included some key projects in the August and September columns. I can go over them, but they are projects that have been identified to be added to the quarterly $7.8 million amount.
Which is the most important project that was done, I guess? There's a couple.
Beginning with the first page here on the list, we are adding $650,000 for the Villanueva Water Service transfer, $300,000 for the high school, the new high school memorial, that the board, that BISD accepted our offer on. Second page, the biggest dollar amount there is on the towards the bottom, $95,000, the East 13 street gravity and sewer improvements.
And then the raw water line from town to sector.
And then the bigger money projects are on the last page. You'll see that for the sanitary sewer overflow projects contract, design package of 679 with AECOM, we've added $205,000 for August, $96,000 for September. $1.9 million was added for September for the for additional project designs under contract. Another $774. So these are part of the stimulus projects, additional costs for design, and some of these will be, perhaps coming back to the board for approval. I'm not sure, but we are getting ready for the award of the stimulus money. So some of these monies are having to be needing pre-funding or funding with commercial paper that may not be included. Some may or may not as reimbursements from the grant. And then we added $50,000 for the project management of the overall grant application, our agreement with RW Bank. So,
what's the current rate right now on the commercial paper project?
Commercial paper rate is between 0.3 and 0.4, 0.4% interest. Very good rate. It's
Say we're about about 18, 19 million.
The combined amount would be the prior to, in prior quarters, we awarded 9,994,000. This quarter, July, September is 7.8 million, for a total of 18.
What do we go to bonds?
We-
What they want? I thought it was like 15 to 20.
We have, out of these amounts, we have spent about 4.3 million through today, through August, 4.7. Our goal is to continue monitoring the market. We have had discussions with Goldman Sachs. They would like to see a good-sized package, 8-10 million. So I'm gonna see how they feel about 5 or 6, as soon as we get to 5 or 6. But as long as we're able to carry it financially, because we are carrying these expenses with our own improvement funds, as long as we have that room, we can delay the actual going to market on commercial paper. We do have a reimbursement resolution in place where it's been, clearly stated that we're going to spend our money and then reimburse ourselves with commercial paper proceeds. But financial advisor may recommend 10 million, 15 million, so it can be a good round number for Goldman Sachs to put out in the market.
And the commercial paper funding, what's our cap?
Cap overall is 50 million.
50?
50, 50. So we would actually take it along to fix rate debt when we get into the $30, $40 million range, to fix it and then do the 25-year principal and interest.
How long does it take to get it converted from commercial paper to a bond?
The process, it will be like a brand new bond issue with city ordinance, city approval of new debt, getting to, the underwriters lined up and whether we're gonna go with a negotiator or competitive. But it could take about 3 months to complete the process with bond counsel and financial advisor and the underwriter.
That's if everything goes well.
If everything goes well. And then the commission, of course, the approval to issue
I
the
would say
debt.
120 days.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve staff's recommendation to approve commercial paper funding for water and wastewater capital improvement projects revised for the period of July through September 2009, totaling $7,814,868. Mr. Farias makes a motion. Do I have a second? Second, Commissioner Hinojosa. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Number 8 is consideration and approval to adopt changes in Brownsville Public Utility, Electric, Water, and Wastewater Service policies for Chapter 6, eligible repayment policy. I think 6, nobody really had any problem with. There was 7, there was a couple of changes recommended, and anyway, we'll do item number 8 first, which is Chapter 6, I believe.
Yes, Chapter 6, I didn't note any changes and everything was,
Does anybody have any comments or questions on Chapter 6? I have Mr. Farias makes a motion to adopt the recommendations of the new changes as proposed. Do I have a second? Mr. Nahara makes a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Approved on Chapter 6. Item number 9, consideration and approval to adopt changes to the Brownsville Public Utilities Board, Electric, Water, and Wastewater Service Policy for Chapter 7, application of impact fees to finance water and wastewater services to new developments. There were some questions or changes requested. Do we want to make the changes? If we do, then we'll need to table this item. If we don't, then we'll.
Mr. Chairman, you had some concerns there. I don't know if you want to go section by section, or you're going to take care of it all at once. The concerns will come from me.
No, I had some concerns about inclusion of some language in there that make it somewhat unwieldy, particularly when the legislature convenes, as it does every 2 years, to our benefit, if not our detriment. And they're always making changes. And so if we crack the language from the statute into here, and I think it just gets unwieldy, and if we don't make changes, we'd have to make changes periodically, almost like every 2 years, anytime the legislature meets. So I didn't particularly want to include the definitions, I just wanted to say the definitions of these items will be pursuant to statute under chapter 395.
But I think, Dick, you said you could put in the language there, or you already have the language in there that will cover us, make sure that we update our policies as the changes are dictated by legislation or city ordinance.
7.1 is the sort of the introductory omnibus section that tries to indicate that. But then, as we discussed in the workshop, for instance, under 7.3, new development, you could add a proviso. If you wanted to keep the state law language in there, you could add a proviso such as, or as may be periodically amended by the Texas legislature.
Will that satisfy you, Mr. Chairman?
The problem would be is that, yes, it is as amended, it's always subject to amendment, but the problem is that it's not in the policy, so we'd have to amend the policy again to include the new language.
But he's
Isn't it
willing,
always superseded?
but he's willing to include the language there that would safeguard the concern.
Well, no, I mean, the statute provides that it's overriding over anything else which we do here, so it wouldn't be adding anything else. I think one of the things we did talk about was on 7.1 was to remove the .001 et sec.
Yes.
There, Mr. Farias had a couple of concerns or questions that he wanted to maybe address or add to.
The only,
Before we go there, though, are you satisfied with, I want to make sure we get what you want.
What I would want would be the exclusion of all the definitions. It's not going to happen, so.
So then we're going to vote on the whole thing as it is to be proposed.
Well, no, with a couple of changes.
there was a note in 7.4 about removing after the year 2000. I'm sure that Maryland's got good notes. We reordered the paragraph in subsection 7.5C. Reordered the wording, pretty much kept it the same, but reordered it.
Should we table it and then the next meeting?
Well, I'm deferring to the chairman, I mean, because I don't have a concern, he was the one that really had the most.
Well, I mean, my only concern was just make it unwieldy and then have to just revise it every 2 years or 3 years. And we haven't revised it for 20 years, so how really realistic is it we're gonna revise this every 2 years or 5 years? But, on recommendation of council, there's, leave the definitions in, so I don't see a movement of my following my recommendation. So, but there is, like I said, a couple of questions here that maybe, why don't we just,
Can I recapture the changes, and then that way that could be
yes,
included
just
in the
clean it up
motions
a
and
little
clean
bit.
it up? On the changes that I have is section 7.1, remove the .001 and subsequent ESQ. And then I have the next change on 7.4, remove after the year 2000. And that was, and then following on section 7.5, subsection C, we are rephrasing that sentence. We're removing in addition, and the new sentence will start with the Brownsville City Commission pursuant to local government code 395.058 shall appoint a CAIA to periodically review and validate the proposed CIP and the city's land use assumptions. So those are the 3 noted changes that, based on the discussions we had earlier on the workshop.
and I think Mr. Benitez was talking about, when could we or should we, accept the, impact fees payment, but I think we're bound by statute, so we can't really,
If you want, Mr. Chairman, Mr. O'Neill has suggested that perhaps we table it till the next meeting to make these changes that you all have talked about and to try and see how we can work in the problems that we discussed in executive session and have it for you for the next meeting.
I make a motion to table.
I have a motion by Mr. Morales to table, do I have a second?
Second.
have a second by Mr. Farias. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, the ayes have it. That's tabling item number 9. And number 10, consideration motion to adopt changes for the utility board, electric water, wastewater service policy for appendix B, schedule of temporary charges. Do I have a motion to the table? I have a motion by Mr. Morales. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Farias. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Those 2 items will be tabled to the next meeting. All right, we're now to the consent item agenda. Is there any items that need to be discussed, need to be taken out of the consent item? If not, I will accept the motion to approve items 1 through 12 on the consent items. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Hinojosa makes a motion. Do I have a second? Morales seconds it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. I will now entertain a motion to recess. I believe that's the next item on the agenda. Mr. Hinojosa makes a motion.
Adjourn.
To adjourn. Adjourn.